Hello, everybody. Welcome to Money 2020 Europe. My name is Tyler Paith. I'm a reporter here at FinTech Futures, and today I'm very, very excited to be joined by Griffin's David Jarvis. David, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Tyler. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. We are here very early days on Money 2020 Europe, day one, first half of day one.
I'm already exhausted.
Well, me too. I'm shattered. I can't wait for my bed. First takeaways from the first half of day one. What do you think so far?
Oh gosh. I'm essentially just purely reacting, I guess. I have a very, very full diary of meetings with both investors, but also potential customers in the payments, wealth space. It's hard to imagine a sort of higher density venue and setting than this.
Right. There's a lot of really good people to speak to, and we have one of the best ones in front of us now. So before we get going, we've got some really good questions. You've just finished your licensing, really exciting. You've got really good backers we're going to talk about. But before we do that, can you just give us a brief snapshot of what Griffin is?
Yeah. So we bank fintechs. So we are a fully authorized Bank of England, PRA, FCA regulated bank. And we provide safeguarding and client money services to companies in the payment space and the wealth space, as well as unregulated firms that maybe have more complex payment automation needs, as well as doing white labeled sort of embedded savings propositions.
Very, very interesting. And well, a lot of that provision that you spoke about just then has really been fueled by your regulatory licensing in March. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sure in post-edit they'll do some sort of like streamers coming out or something, hopefully. Probably not. But that's a huge achievement. I remember reporting on that at the time and thought, oh, well done, Griffin, because I've been following you for a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about that sort of licensing process, very long and arduous, I imagine, and more importantly, what advice you would give to other companies that were looking to achieve the same?
Yeah, I jokingly often will tell them not to do it at all. There was an interview with the NVIDIA CEO a couple of months ago, and they asked him, what advice would you give to your younger self? And he was like, if I was giving advice to my younger self, I would never have done this. Like, I didn't know how hard it would be, and it is the sort of thing that, like, having gone through it, I would never wish it on anyone ever again. And yet, like, we have gone through it, and here we are. So in our case, we knew from the beginning that we needed to be a bank in order to do the thing that we wanted to do. And so it was be a bank or nothing. On many, many different occasions, people pushed us to try to be something else. And I am glad that we stayed the course and really kept our focus. There's like a video from 2016 before we even incorporated where we were applying to get into YC, and it's like a 5-minute, it's embarrassing. It's like me still in my flat in San Francisco. And yet, like, the pitch that I gave then, sloppy though it is of the same business that we have now. So it's cool how little has changed.
Follow your dreams, you say, and hopefully you won't look back on this interview in 5 years' time with quite as much embarrassment. But
I had a very different haircut at the time, so the haircut will at least be less embarrassing this time around.
I got mine cut especially for this conference here today. So yes, I feel your pain. In terms of that licensing journey, yes, you landed the full license in March, but for just up to a year before that, you were operating on an AWR, authorized with restrictions license.
Yep.
How has the transition been for you going from that AWR license to a full banking license?
So, operating with authorization with restrictions or in the mobilization period was really crucial for us in terms of signing our first cohort of customers. So we ran a sort of pilot program called Launchpad, which we used to sign 8 customers that we are in the process of taking live. Some are live already. And it was valuable in giving them the confidence that we were authorized, right? That we were going to overcome the hardest hurdle, right? The regulators don't want to give you authorization with restrictions unless they really hope and intend for you to become fully authorized. They do have some expectations for you over that period, But they think kind of on balance, we have confidence that this is a firm that will enter the market. But of course, moving from that, where you're selling but you can't really operate, certainly not at any scale, to actually having to operate at scale is very, very different. And so mobilization is definitely still kind of it's a transition period from build mode to run mode, whereas now we're very much in like full on run mode. How do we make this efficient? How do we make this really work as a commercial entity?
That is really interesting to think about, sort of that lead up process. I mean, do you think your standing as a company has ultimately shifted for the better because of the licensing?
Oh yeah, I mean, we have no purpose without a bank license. Like, we had one customer, and it was always for us about this, right? And so it's wonderful to finally be where we wanted to be. And then, of course, the next thing one starts thinking about is all of the things that you don't yet have that you wish you had, right? Like, I wish we had more international payments. I wish we had card issuing. I wish we had blah, 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 blah. But now we actually get to go and pursue those things while having customers and a viable business in the meantime.
That's a very, very good thing to hear, and that you're in that mindset of being a fully licensed bank. The licensing is sort of one very critical aspect of your product delivery, by all means, but you are also quite significantly backed. I mean, if we look, we've got Mass Mutual Ventures, Nordic Ninja, very good name, and Briga, who I could never remember how to pronounce. You are leveraging quite considerable funds and the support of your investors at this time, along with your licensing. How are you going to leverage those funds to become a fully operational bank, or how are you doing it right now?
Yeah, I mean, so as I find myself briefing investors at the conference, building a bank is not cheap, and running a bank is not cheap, right? And so, yes, we have a team of 50 people on the technology side, engineers, designers, product people, but we also have 50 people helping us to run the bank across finance, risk, compliance, operations. And so, those funds are there to help us run this business while we scale revenue until such time as we are a profitable business.
Moving then on to some of your other product remits and services that you're working on. You've got a foundations program, which I was reading a little bit about online, and I mentioned it when I was reporting on your licensing. I thought it would be very relevant.
Yeah.
Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so when we went through AWR, we ran this program, which I've already mentioned, called Launchpad, which was really successful for us. And so the thing that we did with Launchpad was to look for companies that really understood that they would be design partners, right? So they would be working with an entity that was newly licensed, that was really going to be doing quite a bit of work and polish on the products. Foundations is intended more for companies that don't necessarily want to do quite so much design partnering, but also recognize that they're going to be working with a fairly early stage bank, right? And so we're looking for companies that, don't need to work with a Barclays or a NatWest in order to be comfortable. They're happy to work with a younger, sort of more technology-oriented entity. But where we might be, let's say, deploying a use case that we already have solved for, right? So we have 2 customers in the salary finance space who are both doing savings accounts, right? So we're looking for kind of repeatable cases where we can deploy the same product into the same sector and build out a couple of, really proven use cases.
That is very, very interesting. You, in terms of your ventures into sort of like banking as a service, you're a UK headquartered company founded in the UK. Being sort of quite fresh in the space with your licensing, still sort of maybe trying to find your feet as a fully operational bank in that sense. What do you think the challenges are of operating banking as a service? I mean, when we look at the market at the moment, especially in the US, I mean, we had a little bit of a discussion before the camera started rolling, but we were looking a little bit like the Synapse sort of saga that's going on in the industry right now. And I'm sure by the time that this gets published, I'm sure that it would have all have flipped and twisted and whatever it's been doing recently. But what can you tell us about the challenges of banking as a service within the current sort of wider global framework?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, right, like we always had this vision of building a bank, and we always had the conviction that you really needed to be a bank in order to deliver these services in a way that was reliable. And I mean that across a sort of system stability perspective, making sure customers' funds are protected, managing your financial crime obligations. And what we've seen over the last 5 years has been a huge number of people try to solve this problem without going through that pain point and not having the controls in place to make sure customers' funds are protected, to make sure financial crime isn't happening. And we've kind of watched like a number of these players die or explode or run into regulatory issues over the last, really last 18 months, I think in particular. And the Synapse one, I think, is probably going to lead to some pretty substantial regulatory change, certainly in the US and maybe even in Europe.
I think.
And so it is a very, on the one hand, it's really validating for us. On the other hand, it is kind of distressing to watch, because at the end of the day, like, the people who are impacted are like normal human beings, right? Who trusted fintechs to keep their money safe, who trusted platforms, and somewhere, you know, that broke down.
In terms of this sort of like trust journey that you mentioned, you know, I think it's so important when you're dealing with, you know, people's funds, their sort of earnings, their savings, anything like that. You've got to have that sort of trusted reputation, right?
Yeah.
And
It's actually, it's really interesting you say that, because one of the things that we used to talk a lot about banks and trust, right? And particularly when we were getting started, you know, we were still very much in the hangover of the great financial crisis, and people would say, right, but people don't trust banks. I mean, they all think banks are all, you know, evil and what have you. And it's like, well, yeah, you don't trust, interestingly, you don't trust banks to behave ethically, but you do trust them to watch your money, right? And you trust them to watch your money in a way that you trust very few other organizations. And that's still true today.
yeah, it's, I was reading Lida Glibdus's book, Bankers Like Us, earlier this year, and she's actually just been on the stage talking about banks and trust.
Yeah.
And it was really, really interesting. And she didn't say it on the stage, but in her book, she was talking about sort of this historic role that banks play in keeping people's money safe as sort of the custodians of the world, and providing these services that people want. And I think that what you touched upon is like, yes, others have failed, but they have not had the same regulatory standing as Griffin. And it's something that you fought hard to achieve, you know?
Yeah, the bar is higher, right? Considerably so.
And so maybe that is a takeaway from this conversation, is that if you want to go higher, if you want to go further in the world of banking, then you really have to play it by the book, which is exactly what you did, and it paid off.
Well, let's hope it will pay off. I mean, it paid off in us getting authorized. Yet to be proven that we can build a highly successful business. I think we can.
Well, I think you can as well. We can, us two together.
Thank you.
Looking at what you're doing right now, and what you've done and where you're going, I think is really, really interesting. But David, it's been a pleasure to talk to you today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure we'll see each other at
sure
some point in the madness of 2020. But thank you very much, everybody who's followed along online on our website and socials. If you would like to find out any more information about Griffin, Money 2020, or the fintech world in general, please head over to our website, fintechfutures.com. Until next time, my name has been Tyler Pave, and I've enjoyed this interview very much. Thank you.